Hi, today we're going to take a look at the Power XND 2000. This is an 11-stop variable ND filter by Aurora, and what we're going to do today is take a look at how it compares to the Syrp variable ND filter, which we have reviewed here recently. So let's begin by taking a closer look at the Power XND 2000. So let's start by taking a closer look at the Power XND 2000 and on the way we can do a quick specs comparison to the Syrp variable ND filter, which we have tested here. The Power XND 2000 has a pretty thin profile, while the Syrp, which is pretty thin on its own, has around 8.1mm profile from our measurement. The Power XND 2000 has about 7.6mm profile, which is very nice. The unit has dots on the side compared to the lines on the Syrp. We actually prefer lines or even numbers as they are easier and faster to read. The reason why no manufacturer uses numbers with variable ND filters is probably the non-linear nature of these filters, and we shall talk about this factor later on in the video. The Power XND 2000 is actually a little bit easier to turn than the Syrp filter because of the deeper grooves on the upper part of the filter. The Syrp has a texture on the lower part which is just a tad less convenient to turn. Even with the naked eye, it's easy to see that the Power XND 2000 passes considerably less light than the Syrp when both filters are on the lowest settings. According to Aurora Aperture, the manufacturer of the Power XND 2000, the filter has no less than 11 stops or ND 2000 of light reduction capability, which has been only available with fixed ND filters until now, whereas commercially available variable ND filters only have up to 6 stops or ND 400 capability. Now we are going to test this claim in this video as well as see how things such as sharpness, colors, vignetting and the dreaded X factor affect this innovative filter, but before we go into all of these, here is just a few more quick notes. The Power XND 2000 comes in 4 filter sizes, 67, 72, 77 and 82mm, with a few others on the way. We use the 82mm version with a step-up ring that we got from the Syrp filter. They worked okay apart from the fact that the markings on the filter were always on the side of the lens, thus hard to view. I'm not sure if this can actually be fixed. We tested with an ultra wide angle lens, the Sigma 10-20mm f4 to f5.6 on our D7100. As for the filter itself, the Power XND was designed in California, and besides everything that we have already mentioned, it also includes multiple layers of nano coating applied to the glass surface for anti-reflection purposes. Before we start with these tests, a quick note. Every test that you're going to see in this section was shot in stills. Although we did run these tests in video as well, since we didn't want to play with the shutter speed in video, we were limited to only changing the aperture and the ISO, which can both affect the image quality to a degree. So we decided to go with stills where we could show you the differences while only playing with the shutter speed. Let's start with the most obvious part, stopping power. Does the Power XND 2000 really has 11 stops of light reduction capability? Well, in our testing the answer is almost. We were able to push the filter to about 10 stops, but the effective light reduction, the part that you would really want to use, was lower than that. We'll see how much exactly in a second, however this was still proved to be much higher than what the Syrp filter was able to do. The first test that we did was to look at sharpness. We started by testing our 10-20mm Sigma lens without any filter at f8. And then we tested with both the Power XND 2000 and the Syrp in different ND levels. You can see our results on the screen right now, and you can also check the written review for a better look, but our conclusion is that the Power XND 2000 is visually sharper than the Syrp and that the Power XND 2000 reduces almost nothing from the sharpness of the lens. Although we have to be honest here, the Sigma is not the sharpest lens in the world, but it is the only one that we had that fitted both filters with a single step-up ring. Now we move on to vignetting, and here the news are not as good for the Power XND 2000. Apparently it projects more vignetting than the Syrp, and you can see this throughout the entire range of the ND. At maximum ND levels, Both filters are not usable in our opinion, although at least the Power XND 2000 doesn't display dramatic color shifting, which you can find with the Syrp. Talking about color shifting, this was the most complex test that we performed. We ran it on 4 different days and got some very strange reading, including a day when we got some very peculiar blue color cast on the Power XND 2000. However, in the next day, everything seems back to normal. Anyway, here are our final results from the 2 filters versus our results without any filter. As you can see, they all look very similar. We now want to talk about the X factor, as we love to call it, or basically the X pattern that you tend to get in variable ND filters close to the limit of the ND light reduction capability. You can see an example from the Syrp, which seems to display this issue over 8 lines as marked on the filter. However, we didn't see this with the Power XND 2000, even way up. Although, as you have seen, this filter does seem to have significant vignetting close to its limit. So what do we have here? Well, we summed most of our findings in this table, which you can also find on the article on Lensvid. What it shows us is that the Power XND 2000 is a much stronger ND filter than the Syrp. While the Syrp minimum setting only gives you about 2/3 of a stop of light reduction, the Power XND 2000 gives you more than 3.5 stops. In total, the Power XND 2000 has over 9.5 stops of light reduction capability, although if you consider the heavy vignetting, you would probably only want to use about 7.5 of those, which is still much better than the 4.5 that you would want to use with the Syrp. Just like the Syrp, the Power XND 2000 light reduction capability isn't linear, so it will reduce more light more quickly closer to the max level of the filter. However, we did discover that the Power XND 2000 doesn't have such a huge drop in light reduction at the very end, which isn't usable on both filters due to vignetting and, in the case of the Syrp, also the X factor. Now we get to the bottom line. The Power XND 2000 does offer a great deal of light reduction, possibly more than any other variable ND filter on the market and surely more than the Syrp. It is also sharper than the Syrp and has no X factor when pushed to the maximum, and is also less expensive at under $120 versus the $190 for the Syrp. On the downside, it does produce more vignetting and basically offers the same exact usable variable stops of light reduction as the Syrp. So you don't get more control on how much light reduction you have than you have on the Syrp, just less light. In our view, the Power XND 2000 can actually coexist with the Syrp and maybe other similar variable ND filters on the market, with the Syrp being used for minor light reduction and the Power XND 2000 for cases where you really need some serious light reduction. Just keep in mind that for very long exposures in stills during the day, you would still need a dedicated non-variable ND filter. So this was our look at the Power XND 2000 variable ND filter by Aurora. You can read the full review on lensvid.com, where you can find our test images, and as always, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you on the next video.